We're very fortunate to have a member of the Liberal government, Member of Parliament, of course, for Cloverdale-Langley City, John Aldag joins us. John, thanks very much for coming in. We appreciate it.
My pleasure to be here.
Let me just ask you first. You were part of the sweep across the country as the Liberals kind of took office. How much of a role do you think the platform of the party to legalize marijuana played in the party's win?
Sure. Well, I've had some constituents who have said that it was a core part of their reason for supporting our government. Many people have seen that the prohibition that we've been facing for many years simply hasn't worked, and that's why they supported us. So it was important. I think we had a lot of other things we also ran on, but it was one of our key platform promises, and we're working on delivering that now.
Now, July 2018 seems to be the date now. People are talking about it. It's kind of been a moving target. How difficult has this been to navigate through?
Well, yeah, legislative challenges, timelines are always a bit of a challenge, and but we are working on it. The legislation was debated before we rose for the summer, and we'll continue. There's committee hearings right now happening in Ottawa, which is part of that legislative process. There were chiefs of police in talking to the health committee this week, and so it will continue on. It'll come back for third reading sometime into the fall or winter calendar. It still needs to go to the Senate and go through their process. So it's a very aggressive timeline for legislation, but it's also important that we get it done. So yeah, we're working to try and meet that deadline of next summer.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, how much of a work in progress is it? Like every time you meet, is there another idea, another change, or things that you didn't foresee?
No, I think that the people that have really been leading the discussion on this have really benefited from work that a task force did. So we had a special group that went out and talked to Canadians, looked at best practices internationally, and so there was a really good kind of blueprint of how we could proceed. I think that the government, the executive branch, including the ministers of justice and health, were able to take the recommendations, many of them from that task force, and really that's what's guiding the legislation. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. There was a lot of work done in advance, and we are able to build on other jurisdictions that have gone before us, although nobody has done it on a national scale like we're doing, and at least not in North America. We haven't seen it, obviously, and so it is a work in progress. As I say, the committees, as they hear from witnesses, will be able to perhaps make recommendations to the government on how to fine-tune it. But I think we have the essence of a good piece of legislation to start the discussion with Canadians.
So do we think that it's going to be rolling by, you made a comment that it was possible, there was talk about it coming out on Canada Day, but it's getting pushed back. Do you think it's going to actually be on time, do we think, or? Yeah,
well, I hope so. We've made this commitment to do it. As I'd mentioned as we were chatting beforehand, that there's a question if Canada Day is the right day because we could end up with Cannabis Day, and that's not take away from the special nature of July 1st. And so if we miss July 1st and it goes to another day over the summer, I'd be fine with that. But there are a lot of parts at play here right now. The other important part is that the federal government has one role in this, and that is essentially the legalization. When it gets into a lot of the details of things that I get asked about by constituents, everything from where will I be able to buy it, and what are the
can I grow
cons, can I grow, all of like some of those details will actually have to come from the provinces because of the constitutional jurisdiction.
Does that not bring up an issue though? Like, shouldn't the rules be the same if I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or I live in Vernon, BC? I shouldn't be maybe treated differently when it comes to something like that. Kind of opens up other possibilities for problems.
Right. I think that the response I have to that is it treated as kind of equivalent to alcohol. If that's a fair example, where the provinces do set their rules, and so they have controls. Age limits differ across the country, so we may see that with cannabis. Quite frankly, I believe the draft legislation right now says 18, but we could have jurisdictions that decide 19. I know that there are bodies such as some of the medical community are saying that is still too young. Maybe 21 is the right age, and so we may end up with differences across the country, just like we have with alcohol.
When you talk about the ages, and I know here in BC and in Vancouver, there was the concerns about being near schools.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in my 50s. When I was like 14, 15, and I was going to school, you could get it anywhere. And it's pretty much the same now. Like, I just wonder how much time and effort gets put into talking, and not to downplay the importance of protecting children. But children can, kids can get it now whenever they want now. Like, it's not hard. It's not one of those things that we're just bringing into to consumers. It's been around forever already. And I just wonder how much effort are we putting into and again, whether it's the rules regarding schools or everything else, young people, the ages, when kids are doing it all over the place right now.
Right, but I think that's one of the things to understand is that that's a key driver behind this. We know that the evidence that's out there says that cannabis does have negative effects on the developing mind. We know that Canada has the highest level of cannabis use in the industrialized world, and despite it being illegal in many of those jurisdictions. And so our public policy has failed. And so we're trying to rethink this. How do we actually protect our youth? And you're right, there are going to be some that get access to it. There are bootleggers for alcohol, and there may be bootleggers, but that's where this legislation actually includes fairly strict penalties and frankly punishments for those who provide that bootlegging service. So the idea is that we want to protect our youth. We want to make it more difficult for them to have access to it, and for the mechanisms that pop up like bootlegging, there'll be punishment to go with that. On the where it's distributed, again, that's probably going to be a provincial or even municipal jurisdiction.
There's so many levels. There's so many people get involved in it. As you probably are well aware, the more chefs in the kitchen, the more trouble there is kind of turning the recipe around. That's what concerns, from the outside looking in, I think, oh my God, if I had federal, provincial, and municipal politicians all involved in the process, how much red tape's there going to be.
Yeah, and that's where it's really critical that the federal government do its part now, because we really are the lead step in this whole public policy discussion. We need to deal with the legalization. We need to take it out of the criminal code before anybody else can do any of these other pieces, and that's why we have an aggressive piece. Now, just when I talk about next July, our process may be finished, but there's still a lot of work that needs to happen from the other jurisdictions. So will there be distribution channels? Ontario has announced that they'll have something equivalent to the liquor distribution system, and they'll have their cannabis stores, much like there's a liquor store in Ontario. Will that be in place by July? It's hard to say because everything needs to come together. But right now, our piece, the federal piece, is really the lead piece, so that we can set the rules on what's allowed, what's not allowed, and then the other jurisdictions will be able to layer their role on top of it.
Before we let John go, usually people could ask him questions.
Yeah, normally we're going to have questions after every guest. So unfortunately, John is a very, very busy man. So he has to leave and head over. It's okay, it happens. So he's got a very important meeting. But in the future, we will be taking your live questions. So the next guest, and
you'll have an opportunity the rest of the show
for
sure.
So.
And if you'd like to have me back, if I could help, I'd be more than happy to.
Oh, you're going to be our voice in Ottawa. You're going to be able to keep us in the loop.
Talk to your viewers and take questions, because it's going to be really important that we have this kind of open discussion with Canadians in the coming months, that we address the concerns that are coming up and let people know that we've given thought to the various aspects of this, because it is complex, it's a huge change, and we want to get it right.
John, thanks so much for your time today and being our first guest on THC.
Really appreciate it. And thanks for taking this topic out there to Canadians.